Hello guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to our next unboxing video of a Swiwin turbine. Now this is a Swiwin 140. We actually have two of these. And anyways, let's unbox this thing, do some reviews and test runs on it. Alright guys, before we unbox and review this engine, if this is your first time finding my channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button down below. Give the video a thumbs up. When you do hit that subscribe button, hit the bell so you don't miss any of my new videos. We've got tons of cool things happening on the channel. Well, let's open this thing up. And nothing's going to be or should be overly different from any of the other engines we have reviewed on the channel. So we've got our standard engine package that everything comes in. It's all nicely packaged. We have some fuel line. So let's take these parts out individually and take a look at them. All right, so we've got our fuel line, as I've mentioned. We've got our Festo or Pisco valve. Fuel filter that's included in the engine, and it's got an arrow telling you which direction to install. We've got our V3 version 3 ECU or data relay module, because the ECU is actually in the engine. We've got our standard cable set that comes with the engines. And we have our beautiful aluminum data terminal, full color screen, daylight visible. We've got the brushless fuel pump, which has the recirculation loop on it, or extra loop on it, which grinds up bubbles. And if you have not seen the Swiwin 80 video, maybe I'll link that down below. I was trying to restrict that thing to get it to go into restart mode, and it was brutally tough, which is great, but it was really tough to make that thing try and go into restart. Awesome. All right, and the last thing, guys, is our engine itself. Okay, so we'll take a close-up look at the engine itself. So beautiful manufacturing, just like all of their engines that I've seen so far, and really, really impressed with everything that I've seen with Swiwin. And that's why they're all in my planes. So yeah, it looks really, really nice. What I'll do is I'll take this front cover off for you just so you can see how it's all made up. Really easy to take off. It's only 3 T9 Torx fittings, and that'll give us a look underneath the cover just so you guys can see the beautiful compressor, and we'll see how the board and everything's made up. It's actually quite interesting. All right, so 3 fasteners and the cover's ready to come off. Now, one of the nice things about this is you don't have to take apart any of your fuel fittings because the cover is all machined around all of those pieces. So when you take this off, there's going to be the wire connecting the starter motor. So we can undo that. And we've got our cover screen with our integrated starter motor there. There's a shot underneath of what it looks like. So the nice thing about the way this FOD screen works is it's fastened with the plate around the brushless starter motor. And then all of the end pieces of the screen are actually sitting past the intake of the turbine. So nice nice setup. Now, one of the things initially that I like about Swiwin turbines is the compressor size. So compressor size, nice big diameter. The other thing is it's all polished and pretty looking, which is performance-wise cool, but just looks pretty as well too. So looking underneath the hood here, we've got the fuel intake, and you can see that there is retaining clips on all of the fittings, which is also a plus. I know there is some turbines out there that don't have that. Nice little plus, I think. The other thing is this is Teflon tubing, so it's very, very rigid, stiff tubing. It's not just standard Festo or standard 3mm or 4mm line. So it's also a nice thing because it's heat resistant. The Swiwin turbines, they put a filter underneath the cover, so it's kind of like your last resort filter. and that is before the solenoid valve. So there's the solenoid valves. One is your fuel supply, one is your startup supply. We've got our ECU, or our brain, is basically built into the turbine itself. So that's the board that you see here. And then you can see the temperature probe right there. And nice setup. So we'll pop the cover back on, very, very simple. And once that's back on, we're going to weigh these components. All right, guys, so most of these components are fairly standard, obviously, because the components used on the engine are all the same, but we'll weigh these things individually. So the first thing we have is the 140 engine itself. So the 140 engine, we're at 1393 grams. So the engine itself, we're at 1395 grams divided by 454. That comes out to 3.07 pounds, so call it 3 pounds. And we'll keep everything together on these, so like the cable for the fuel pump, this could be taken off, but to keep things standardized, we'll just do it all together. So we add the fuel pump in, that brings us up to 1492. We add the data relay module, that brings us up to 1534. And the cable set itself, that is 1594. We'll leave the data terminal out because you don't need this in the plane to run it. So the total weight for all the components to install the engine and run it in the plane, 1594 divided by 454. So that brings us to 3.5 pounds for the total engine package. All right, so next thing we'll do, guys, is we are going to get the engine installed on my test stand. All right, guys, so just getting the fuel tank set up. Everything is installed on the stand. If you're interested in these Swiwin turbines, there is a link in the description down below to my webpage where you can purchase the entire lineup of Swiwin turbines. I have been so impressed with these things so far. This is the first time I will have run a 140 series engine, so it's kind of interesting. Every time I get a new engine in and I'm doing these test runs on them, it's pretty cool to see the new engine and how it runs. So we're doing the standard tests that we've done previously. Now keep in mind, we are using, right now, it's kerosene and a little bit of jet fuel or Jet A. There's a bit of a mix in there, so probably 25% Jet A. The rest is kerosene. They're basically the same fuels. We are at 3,200 feet above sea level. That's important to remember as well, because you'll see a 15-ish% drop in the output numbers on these turbines at our altitude. So I'm just going to fill up our primary fuel tank. I'm going to fill up our test fuel tank. Now this test fuel tank, if you haven't seen my tests before, this test fuel tank is to test the fuel consumption at full throttle. So depending on the turbine size, I will fill this to either 500 milliliters or 1,000 or 1 liter of fuel. On this engine, we'll do a 500 milliliter full throttle run and see how long it takes to go through that. So we're going to do the standard test run on this engine. So what does that look like? Well, I've already fired up the ECU, the data terminal and stuff, and I've already adjusted this engine for the conditions that we're in. So the engine is ready to go. I haven't started it yet, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill these tanks up, prime the system, and get everything done. We're going to start the engine. We're going to let it stabilize at its RPM for idle. Then we're going to slowly increase the throttle stick to max. And we're going to let it sit there until it's comfortable and stabilized. Then what's going to happen is we're going to do some throttle speed tests. Now these turbines come preset to a figure of 25 on the acceleration. I've bumped this one up to 35 initially. It's probably going to get us in around that 4-second mark. So that's going to be the second thing we do. The third thing we're going to do is we are going to do the fuel consumption at full throttle with the 500 milliliters. Now when this runs out, I'm going to switch the fuel supplies back to the primary fuel tank, and then that's also going to test the restart of the engine as well too. So there's going to be a whole lot that goes on in that run, but just wanted to give you guys an idea of what's going to happen and the order that it's going to happen in. All right, guys, ready to go? Let's run this engine. So first thing to notice is very respectable idle thrust numbers, just letting the idle settle down to 38,000 RPM. So at this point I slowly increase the throttle over about a 20-second period to max throttle. So the next thing we're going to do is a test run on the throttle up speed. So first throttle up took 3.1 seconds. We will try it again to check the result. So for this next section, I go to mid-stick just to see how much push we're getting at mid-stick, and we do a full throttle thrust test. And now is time for the full throttle fuel burn test. If you watch closely, at 1 minute and 15 seconds, the fuel pump starts to suck a bunch of air, and I switch the fuel supply over and the turbine doesn't stop. And in order to stop the turbine, I had to completely close the valve for about 2 seconds. So what I do in this next section is start to open up the test valve and close the main fuel supply valve to see what happens if I introduce a crap load of air bubbles. Alright guys, well at the end there, what I did was I opened up the full throttle fuel tank line and was closing the other line, so it was sucking a bunch of bubbles in, and just watching the bubbles go in and in and in and in and in, it was pretty impressive to see that that happen like that. So what happened was, when the full throttle tank was almost empty, it started sucking in bubbles, and I actually switched it over, but there was a bunch of bubbles in the line, kept running, and then what I had to do was completely close the valve on the regular fuel supply until the engine shut off, and then turn the valve back on for the restart. So very, very impressive engine. You'll see at the end of the video it said RPM low. That's because it had a crap load of air bubbles going into it, and there was basically zero fuel supply. So I'm going to clean this thing up, and then we'll do some closing remarks. Alright guys, just some final remarks and thoughts on this Swiwin brushless 140 engine. Alright guys, great size, great weight on this engine, great output. Let's get down to some of the hard data. Now all my findings will be posted down below in the description, but one of the important things is how much fuel did it use at full throttle. So for you Americans or people that deal with ounces, I will quote the ounces as well too. So our 500 milliliter of fuel burned in 1 minute and 18 seconds. That's 6.41 milliliters per second. And that means that at full throttle, in 1 minute, this engine uses 385 milliliters at full throttle, or 13.02 ounces per minute. So 13 ounces per minute. So I was just doing some rough thinking on this. So something like my Ultra Flash as an example, with this engine, 3.5 liters or 3,500 milliliters of fuel, I would get 9 minutes at full throttle with this engine. So amazing little engine, and great output on this thing. Very, very impressed and very happy. I know some people may not want to hear this, and this isn't going to be a very popular comment, but now that I've had a bunch of these engines go through my hands, one of the things that I am probably most impressed about compared to one of the previous engine manufacturers that I was supporting was, with all the engines that have come through my possession, I've test run, installed in my planes, customers' planes, things like that, we have had zero issues with these engines. The previous manufacturer, the past few years have been rough. And any of you local guys that have talked to me about this, and we've had some chats about this, you know exactly who I'm talking about. So guys, I'm very impressed with these engines, these Swiwin engines. Yes, they are made in China, but I tell you what, the manufacturing quality on these things is amazing. The materials are amazing. I am impressed with every single part of these engines, and that's why all of my planes have them. So some final thoughts, guys. If you're interested in the Swiwin lineup, you can check my link down below to my webpage. feel free to reach out to me via email, thelightersideofrc@gmail.com. All those links are down below, guys. Thanks for tuning into the videos. Thank you for supporting the channel. I do appreciate it. And don't forget to give the video a thumbs up, and we will see you in the next video.